Welcome to one of the new tanks that I've picked up in my own garage, and this is a vehicle that is super interesting because it leads on to the Panzer VII, and this is a tank that you can pick up right now within the premium bonus, so you can get 50% more XP and also 50% more silver leading up to the Panzer VII, and that includes this vehicle right here, which is the tier 9 German heavy tank that was featured in my German tech tree review that I've recently done on the channel. Now, the VKB in particular is a vehicle that, I don't know, it doesn't really have a whole lot, but you can still have some really good games, and that's what we're going to showcase here. But there are some key weak points about this vehicle and why maybe it's not the tank that it's supposed to be in World of Tanks console. But regardless, what we're doing here is we're showcasing not a fully upgraded version, so granted the vehicle does slightly get better, where you get a top turret and some of the other benefits of that. You can also get a top gun that has 490 alpha damage. This is the 320 alpha damage gun, I believe, comparatively to that top gun. So what can we do in this sort of game? Well, you have very nice kind of consistent damage per minute for a heavy tank. You reload in about 6 seconds, which is really good. You also have very good frontal armor if people don't know the weak points, and the weak points are the side armor. The weak points are the turret armor, at least with stock version of this vehicle, and then on the top version you got a cupola on the top which people will pen, and the other weak point is premium rounds. It is a tank that relies upon just having super thick armor, and unfortunately in World of Tanks, certain tanks just get premium rounds that are better than that armor, so no matter what you do, you're going to get penned, whereas some tanks rely on the angling of the armor, which can ricochet rounds as opposed to just purely blocking the round from coming in. But you can see here we are just holding the line, and this is where the VKB is probably one of the only tanks that can really take a position like this and hold it. Yes, you have things like the Kranvang, but because they're an autoloader you don't have the DPM to be able to kind of hold that position continuously, and as soon as people know you're out of rounds they come around that corner. That's not going to be the case in the VKB because we have the consistent damage gun as well, and I think I will be keeping this 320 alpha damage gun on this vehicle rather than the 490 because it's just more consistent. Now, what you've seen in this game is we've already bounced 1500 damage, and you can do that in this vehicle. This vehicle definitely does bounce a few rounds. I'm not saying that it's going to be able to bounce everything because yes, as we've already talked about, there are some weaknesses, but generally it's able to do a lot of the things that you want from a traditional heavy tank. Now, the problem with this vehicle I find is that in any games where you're required to move, sucks. It absolutely sucks. So although this video is going to showcase 2 replays that are pretty decent and that you can kind of perform admirably in them, the whole premise about the vehicle is that it's not anywhere near as good as you'd like it to be in probably 90% of the games, just purely because you have to move in some of them, and this tank is slow. It's super painfully slow, and not only is it slow, it genuinely just doesn't turn either, so you cannot turn, you're slow. It's just everything that you don't want from a heavy tank, and unfortunately that's kind of what it gets. It does get the armor though, so that's kind of a benefit, at least to some degree. But even when you do have the armor, those top tier games where you're up against tier 9 and 10s, you can kind of be very easy to pen, and people just generally don't really care that you've got armor because of their premium rounds. So yeah, then you rely upon just trying to deal damage with a consistent gun, and if you've chosen the 490 alpha damage gun, then yeah, you're going to be even more of a pickle because you just won't be able to pen at all. So yeah, I just don't think that this tank is very competitive, but nonetheless it's really fun when you do get into scenarios where you do feel like you're bouncing, and when you have held a flank predominantly on your own, as we have in this replay. But hopefully that showcased like some aspects of the tank. It's kind of highlighted the weak points. Now let's actually jump into a more interesting replay where we're showcasing a little bit else, as well as those negatives of having to move, because predominantly that was a pretty stagnant gameplay. Now, the second gameplay I have picked for you guys today is playing on Westfield, and as I always say, this is one of my favourite maps, and that's because every single tank class gets its own option on Westfield. But the problem is when you're this low, yeah, Westfield is probably one of the least favourite maps, because it takes you an eternity to get anywhere, to be able to deal any damage, to impact the game. And especially if you're a player that's used to having manoeuvrable tanks, if you're playing some of the mediums, if you're used to playing light tanks, the VKB will suck. And as will any of the super heavy German tanks that you can play at tier 9, including the like the Mauschen. They all suck, and that's because look at this, we're doing 11 kilometers an hour up to 12 kilometers an hour, and as soon as you start destroying trees and stuff like that, it just drops even more. And so yeah, you're sat for probably the first couple of minutes of the game just even getting to a position where you're able to do any damage, and that's really where my issue with these vehicles comes in. So I don't really recommend it for anyone that's kind of new to the game, because they are so slow and you'll probably find them really, really boring, especially when you get to the fight, you're then getting penned by everything. So yeah, it can be a little difficult. And similarly to that, what I mean by getting to the fight is sometimes you can get to the fight but it's already over and your team's lost, and then you're against 1 versus 9 tanks and they just steamroll you anyway. So it was you were sat there waiting 2 minutes to get into a battle that lasted 10 seconds because the opponents just overwhelm you with sheer numbers, and that's never fun in any video game. So if you are interested in being able to get to the fight quickly, to have engaging games, then the VKB probably isn't for you. But for people that want to challenge and accept the fact that this is not going to be a completely competitive tank, it's decent. It is just decent. There's nothing else to it. It's kind of okay. The one good thing about it is that in this sort of scenario where you've got multiple tanks kind of in front of you, you can do pretty well, and that's because they're all just sat there trying to hit you, trying to pen you, and there's not really a lot that they can do. Now, there's this STA1 who we've taken out pretty quickly, and now it's a case of just seeing what else is over here. I'm kind of conscious that there will be some tank destroyers on the enemy team. I'm not entirely sure, but we're not going to go super aggressive just yet until I find out what's surrounding me. And talking about what's surrounding me, the STA1, his friend it must have been, or at least they weren't platooned actually, so it's just a random STA, but the other STA on the enemy team decided to come towards me. And then we also have this CS who's also sat up there on the ridgeline. That's of course the premium tier 8 Czech tank, I believe. No, Polish, sorry, medium tank. And the CS52 list is okay, but it's nothing too special. It probably doesn't have the penetration to reliably go through the front of us, and so we can kind of just sit here and bounce all of these shells. And we've already blocked 2,000 damage in this game, make that 2,300. And now it's kind of the problem with these tanks, and that is that the VKB doesn't get the perfect accuracy, and especially when you're shooting at the turret of a CS52, yeah, it can be really, really annoying to reliably go through them. And you can see us just trying to hit in between the gun of the dead STA1 and of course the CS. Now the enemy STA1 that's actually over and alive is trying to shoot us in the side, so you're seeing me angle up like this because it's going to make it difficult for the opponents to actually pen me. And if you're interested in finding out how armor can work and how you can angle and what the best angle would be for you, then I have done a full armor guide on the channel recently, so I believe that that's in the How to Get Better at World of Tanks playlist on the channel, so you can have a look at that if you're interested. But in this game we're using those tips and tricks just to bounce a few rounds, and that's how we've been able to actually bounce damage in World of Tanks console. It's been a long time since that's happened, but granted I've not played a lot of heavy tanks recently, but yeah, you just don't bounce damage usually in World of Tanks console because of the premium rounds going around. But with the most annoying tank is the CS52 list. Now I'm not sure if this is a good player or whether he's just kind of got into that position and he's doing okay because he kind of lucked onto it. I don't know, but I'm assuming that he's a good player because he's using the hold down tactics, and hence why I'm kind of focusing on him rather than the STA, because this is not really going to pen me anyway. So You're seeing me here just trying to aim for the turret ring if we can get that, but from this point it's just time to actually advance towards this CS, because me just sat here waiting, he's eventually going to start penning me, and as soon as he finds out that the cupola is the place to pen the VKB, then yeah, I could have been taken out very, very quickly. So we're just going to go forward. I'm conscious that there is other tanks on the enemy team, such as the tank destroyers. I don't know where they are, so we don't want to go too hard and too into it without really thinking about it all too much. So we're going to make our way over to the right, and that way we can kind of switch around and deal with it that way. The CS on the enemy team, he still takes back his position. Unfortunately for him, it's not going to work anymore because he cannot get the actual shot onto us either, so we're just waiting now. He overexposes his hull armor, which allows us to pen him through the side, and now we can kind of advance towards him. It doesn't seem like there's all too much surrounding us, and we can try and finish him off. Now I have got a little bit of support, or at least I think I do, with the medium tank in the central area, so if I get YOLO'd, he may be able to get a few shots off, or you'd at least think, oh, maybe he'll kind of reposition to be able to get some shots off. The other teammates are way over on the other side of the map, so it's unlikely that we're going to get much help from them. So in this engagement, it is typically just a 1 versus 1, and we've just got to make sure that we conserve our hit points against them. Now, granted, we're on 5,520 block damage, so we've blocked nearly 3 times our hit points of our vehicle, which is fantastic. And at this point, we're just going after this medium tank. Now, unfortunately for us, the T28 proc comes out of nowhere. The CS then is going to try and poke us. And what you see me doing here, rather than going towards one or the other, I actually decide to pull right back, and that way we can kind of get some shots of damage off into these people. Now, I'm hoping that my teammate in the medium tank will have turned around and start shooting the T28 prot who's out in the middle of nowhere, and then we could have dealt with them. Unfortunately for us, that doesn't seem to be on his mind at this moment in time. So yeah, there's nothing we're really doing. Now the CS obviously takes the initiative and decides, maybe I shouldn't just sit here and try and hit him from the front, maybe let's try and get round the side of him. Now at this point, in hindsight, what I should have done is continued reversing all the way back, and that way it would have made it hard for the CS to get around the side of us, and also annoying for this T28 prot. It would have also meant that the prot would have had to come towards us and deal with that, but unfortunately that's not the case for us. Now we put a nice one into the CS, and now at this point I'm trying to avoid getting hit by this T28. Now we put a nice round into the CS, hopefully, but of course, right when we needed just a normal roll, we low roll and he gets the better of us finally. That was really, really annoying actually. I would have very much liked some support from the medium tank just to turn around and help me with that T28 prot. It would have made things a lot easier, but unfortunately that wasn't the case in this replay. He does have 3 marks. Don't know whether he actually tried to get a shot, maybe he couldn't get a shot, maybe he just didn't want to reposition, maybe he's too busy dealing with whatever's over this side, but unfortunately for us, we don't manage to get the win, or at least get the win with our tank still intact. And let's jump forward to the result screen and then finish up this video. So there we go, the victory screen right there for you guys. We didn't even make it onto the top 3 podium, but I thought it showcased pretty much everything that you can know about the VKB, and also the armor, how you can use it, and also the sort of gameplay style that you have to think about when playing in vehicles like this. Hopefully it was a good video showcasing a tank that's not traditionally very good, and I would 100% agree this tank is not that good, but yeah, it was fun to play, it's good to play, and I'm enjoying it so far. So yeah, hopefully you'll join me back in the next video where we look at some interesting German tier 9 heavy tanks that aren't quite the VKB but way better in the E75. So join me back on that video coming soon, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.